And my name is Yessenia Martinez, and I am with Chefs de Cuisine Association of San Diego, the Education Foundation. And today I'm going to teach you how to make pretzels. Keep in mind, this recipe is a little difficult, and I want you to have patience, and I want you to read your recipe twice, okay? So I have here on my station my mise en place, okay? I have pre-measured everything. This is very important for you to get into the habit of doing this because it makes the recipe go faster. You don't have to stop and remember, did I add the salt? Did I add the brown sugar? So you have everything ready to go. You can take it one step further. The recipe calls for the use of bread flour. There are many types of flour. This recipe needs bread flour because you want the pretzel to hold its structure. I have my water, and I have warmed my water in the microwave to about 110 degrees. You don't want to go over and make the water too hot because you will kill your yeast, okay? What is yeast? It's gonna help give your bread structure. It's gonna release gas that's gonna give your bread that rise and make it puffy. You know, like a cake when you put it in the oven and it all of a sudden expands? That's what yeast is gonna do for your recipe, okay? So the recipe is very simple, but this is the first step you wanna take care of because it takes 5 or 10 minutes for the yeast to activate. So I'm gonna open my packet of yeast. Inside of my packet, there are 2 1/4 teaspoons. 2 of these, and then a little one that's a 1/4 measure. So I'm gonna add the 2 teaspoons that the recipe requires, but I'm gonna add a little bit more right now because it doesn't really matter at this point, okay? Because the yeast will help our recipe. I wanna get a fork. I wanna add my brown sugar because your yeast, it needs food. It's a living thing. You need to feed it in order for it to wake up and for it to activate on you. You're gonna add your 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil. Okay. At this point, your recipe is giving you salt. You do not want to add it to this water. You don't want to do anything to that yeast. Salt can actually kill the yeast or inhibit it from doing what it's supposed to do. So you're going to leave your salt on one side, and you're going to take a fork and you're going to activate your yeast. It's very important that you mix it and combine it very well, okay? And let your water be warm. 110 degrees, between 90 and 110 degrees, okay? What I like to tell my students is if you can put your finger inside of the water and it feels warm, then the yeast will like it too, okay? So at this point, I'm gonna set this to one side and it should foam on top. That's completely normal and that's what you want. If it doesn't foam at the top, your yeast might not be good anymore. So we need to get some fresh yeast, but that's how you know. Okay, so this is gonna sit to one side and I will go through the rest of my ingredients with you while that's happening. I have my flour already pre-measured, already ready for me to go, and I have my salt, okay? I also have my baking soda, and I have some kosher salt that I'm gonna sprinkle. You know the salt that's crunchy on top of the pretzel that you really like? That's what I have here, but I'm not gonna need that right now. I also have extra flour. Anytime you make bread, you're gonna need extra flour for your workstation, for your rolling pin, and those type of things. There is a lot of foam creating on the top of my measuring cup. This is important. At this point, the yeast is ready to be added to your recipe. Don't let it go too much longer than this because if you do, the yeast can actually die on you. So you want to really make sure that it is ready, and obviously mine is ready, okay? So the recipe calls for sifting of your flour, especially if you're using bread flour. It's very important because it's a heavy flour. You want to add a little bit of air to it. That's what sifting does. So I have 2 bowls set up on my station. One I'm going to sift my flour into, and the other bowl, I'm gonna use it to make the bread. I'm gonna take my silver bowl. It doesn't have to be a stainless steel bowl. It can be any clean bowl that you have. And I have a strainer or a sifter. It can be any one that you have. It doesn't have to necessarily be or look like mine. It can even be smaller. Just sift your flour a little bit at a time. So I'm gonna take my flour and I'm going to add all of my bread flour here with my salt. I'm gonna add all the salt to my flour. This is important because you wanna coat the flour and the salt together. You want your pretzels to be to taste even, to be distributed, the salt to be evenly distributed in your recipe. So I'm just gonna give the bag a quick shake. This will help. And I'm gonna put it through my sifter or my strainer. You can do a little bit at a time if you feel more confident. You don't feel comfortable putting all the flour in at once, you can sift little by little, okay? So you're gonna take your hand and you're gonna tap the side, okay? And it's starting to fall through. Right now I'm adding air to this dough or to this flour, and I am adding lightness. You can sift it 2 or 3 times if you prefer. I'm just gonna do it once. This is when you're gonna see if there's little pieces that you need to push through your sifter, okay? So I have added air to my recipe and I have evenly distributed the salt inside of my flour. That's what I want. So now you can see my yeast is actually wanting to bubble over my cup. This is when I'm gonna start to work. So I have my clean bowl. I'm not gonna add all of my flour at once. If you do that with bread flour, you're gonna struggle, okay? So I'm just gonna add a little bit, okay? And I am gonna add all of my yeast water. It should be warm on your hand when you pour it. And you should have washed your hands before. I did. So make sure your hands are super clean. Whenever you're making bread by hand, always have extra warm water on your side. You might need it, okay? So you're gonna start, take your hand, always try to leave a clean hand, and you're going to press and push the flour through your fingers, okay? This is important because as you add more flour, the dough is gonna get heavier and heavier. When I say we're gonna add flour little by little, it might be a little confusing. So just to give you a visual, you can add flour using a 1/4 measuring cup and add it little by little to your recipe like this as you need it. You can also grab a little bit in your hand and add it by handful to your recipe. You just want to make sure you don't add too much flour at once, okay? I also have on my side a little bit of extra oil in case I need it and a little bit of extra warm water, okay? As you see that it starts to combine, let me make some room for myself here. You can add a little bit more flour at a time. Reason why I don't want you to add it all at once is because it's gonna get really heavy on you. You can twist your bowl and turn it. Underneath my brown cutting board, I have a towel so it won't move my cutting board. You can also put a towel underneath your bowl if you need to, so it won't move around on you. You can see it's starting to form its structure, okay? Put a little bit more in there. You also always have flour, extra flour on the side ready to go in case you need it. Right now, I'm going to be more aggressive with the way I am handling this dough. This dough or a pretzel requires very aggressive kneading. This is what I'm doing right now, okay? I am beginning the kneading process. I'm gonna end that on my cutting board. So, put a little bit more. You can take your hand and push the dough through your fingers, and it is getting very sticky. What I'm gonna do right now, and what I suggest for you to do, wash your hands right now because it will be easier for you to continue the kneading process and the dough making process with a clean hand. So take as much of this dough as you can off of your hands. I'm ready to continue. I'm gonna use my 1/4 cup measure. At this point, I'm gonna put a little bit in my hand and I'm going to start to fold the dough on top of itself, okay? Fold the dough on top of itself. Right now, I'm starting to form my dough. I'm starting to form that structure that I need, okay? So it's not too sticky and it's not too rough right now. I am ready to move to my brown cutting board to continue the process. I haven't added all the flour right now. That's important. So I'm gonna move my dough and I'm gonna add about half of my measuring cup of flour to my work surface, and I'm gonna spread it. You might need to add a little bit more. You can do that. You don't want to add too much here at once. You're gonna bring your flour, try to pick up as much of your dough from your bowl as you possibly can, roll it around, okay? Put that to one side and put your dough on your work surface. Now is when the fun is gonna begin. Remember, whenever you're kneading dough, you're gonna need this part of your hand, and you're gonna need a lot of your strength. Don't feel that you're gonna overwork the dough. If you get too rough with it, it'll actually be good for it, okay? So I'm gonna put a little bit of flour in my hands. I'm gonna rub it between both, and I'm going to start. I'm going to press it over itself, take this part of my hand and push it down. Press it over itself and push it down. It's picking up flour from the bottom, and that's what I want. But I still have flour in my bowl, so I'm gonna continue. I can already feel that it's heavy. If I add too much more flour, it's gonna be very hard for me to work. So at this point, I'm gonna add very little flour, okay? I'm just gonna be using it on my surface. What do I mean by it's right? I weigh it in my hand, it's starting to feel heavy. If I add more flour, it's gonna be too heavy, okay? So right now, it's kind of heavy, and it's also still soft. That's important, okay? So you're going to stretch it, pull it over itself, and press down. So I'm gonna continue, and I'm gonna start to go faster now. You need to do this process for a minimum of 8 minutes. You can go longer. It will actually be better for your bread. I'm gonna continue this process for 8 more minutes, and then I'm gonna show you what the dough looks like when it's ready to be put inside of a container so it can rise. The bread, you want it to get as smooth as you possibly can on this surface right here. I need to let it do its first proof or its first rise. This dough is gonna rise on several occasions. So you're gonna need a container. It could be a bowl like this one. It can be a plastic container, something that's clean. You're gonna put vegetable oil inside of your container. You're gonna take your hand and you're going to put the oil all along the sides. So now you're ready to shape your dough to put it in for its first proof, okay? This is important. You're gonna take your dough and make a pouch on the bottom. This is super important so the dough will rise properly. Do you see how I'm folding it underneath? And I have a pouch. You're gonna take that pouch and put it under or on the bottom of your container. Take a little bit of your oil that you have that's extra and hydrate the top. You can also flip it over, and then redo it. It's very important for you to put oil all on the surface of your dough. If not, the dough is gonna dry out when you go to do the first proof or the first rise. So now you got oil on your hands, so you're gonna just give yourself, a nice cleanup on your hands. So to wrap your container so it can do its first proof or its first rise, we wanna trap as much gas as we possibly can. It's called a catering wrap. What does that mean? Nothing comes in, nothing comes out. So you're gonna take your plastic wrap, give yourself enough so it can go all the way around on the top. And this is gonna be a little difficult, and that's okay. Try to seal it here as much as you can. Take it off, bring it up top, and give it a seal. You're gonna do it now on the opposite side. So you're gonna pull out your plastic wrap, give yourself enough, and you're gonna do the opposite side, the side where there's no plastic wrap, okay? So we're trying to trap as much gas as we possibly can. This is very important because you want that to rise. So just stretch it and manipulate it as you need to, okay? Now it has a seal, it has a tight seal, and it's ready to be put somewhere in your kitchen that is a warm place for it to rise. About an hour and a half later, you should have a gas bubble on your plastic wrap. Take some scissors and you're gonna release the gas very carefully. What kind of gas? Specifically, carbon dioxide gas. So you're gonna release it, and I have a very nice gas bubble on here. This is very good. It means my dough has a very good structure and texture. Now, you need to degas, so you're gonna take your dough, lift it out of your container, take it in your hands and do the same process that you did to put it in there to begin with, okay? You're gonna put it in there, make the little pouch, put it back, put a piece of plastic wrap on top of it and let it rest for 5 to 15 minutes on your workstation. You're gonna pull off your plastic wrap very gently. You don't wanna damage your dough or release too much of your gas. So you pull it off very gently and you're gonna transfer it to your cutting board. That's what I have here. On your cutting board, you're gonna put a little bit of flour. You should receive a little bit of extra flour for your recipe, and you're gonna need it. I also have on my side a little bit of oil, just in case I need it. So, you can use a rolling pin like the one I have here, my wooden rolling pin, to roll the dough into your first rectangular shape. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use a spray bottle. Make sure that it's clean and that it's for kitchen use. You don't want to use something from the garage that is not clean and sanitary. Make sure it's clean. So I need to shape this into a rectangular shape. Don't worry about the measurements. Get it into a rough rectangular shape. What I do with my students, I am a high school culinary arts teacher, and what I usually do for my students is I take my finger and a little bit of flour and I'll draw them a little bit of a visual of how big I want that rectangle. And now they know how much they need to spread it to. Then I'll go take a look at it and I'll say, good, you're ready to start your shapes. So I want to put just a little bit of flour underneath, not too much. You can redo your rectangle if you need to. Put your dough in the center with your hands. You can put a little bit of flour on your hands if you need to, not too much at this point. My dough is soft and it's still sticky. That's what you want. You can start to stretch it with your hands. You can lift it, stretch it, and you can start now with your rolling pin. Put a little bit of flour on it just so it won't stick, and start from the center out, twist it, center out, center out. You want to do this procedure to stretch the dough, but your dough doesn't want you to stretch it. It's very, very, very stubborn. So you kind of have to do the stretching with your hands, maybe switch to your rolling pin until it starts to relax. You will know once it starts to relax, okay? So you keep going. It's a very nice dough. Don't worry about these gas bubbles. That's actually very good in your recipe. Let those be. If you pop them, it's also okay. So continue. Remember, you don't want to have a perfectly rectangular shape. You just want to have something that you can work with to make your strips when you start to shape your pretzels. So I'm going to continue manipulating this dough, and it will work with you eventually. Don't get frustrated at this point. Let it do its thing. I now need to shape strips, because those strips are going to turn into pretzels. I need a couple of utensils for this. I need either a pizza cutter, if you have one at home, or a nice sharp small knife will work just fine. I'm gonna use my pizza cutter for one strip, and then I'll use a knife for the other strip, so you can see if you have either one at home, it will work easy for you. The knife, when you're using it, cut straight. Try not to, the dough is gonna wanna catch on your knife. Just let it go and cut nice and even. So I'll start a strip. You wanna make even strips. You don't wanna make them too thick or too thin, okay? So we'll go about 1 inch or 2 inches of my finger here, and I'll do a rough measurement. Again, I don't want you to worry too much about measuring or getting it perfect. I want you to have about 12 strips. You might have less, you might have more. The whole important thing is for you to practice. So I'm gonna start, we can start in the center, okay? And you can see the dough is nice and relaxed, and there's air bubbles inside. That's good, okay? We can do a piece and half here. And each one of these will make it into 3. One. If it doesn't cut on you, maybe my pizza cutter is not too sharp, you can use your knife and go straight down. And if it gets rough like it is with me, and the strips are starting to look not so perfect, it's okay. Remember, we're gonna shape them and manipulate them a little bit farther, so it'll be okay. Once you've cut your strips, you wanna put them on some type of a cutting board, even on top of a piece of parchment paper in your kitchen. You're going to need parchment paper for this next part of your recipe. You will find that it's much easier to cut your parchment paper into squares. This square of parchment paper is going to help you tremendously when you go transfer it to that boiling water, so it can have its bath in that baking soda water and get that really distinct pretzel look and flavor. If you don't have a square like this, you can take a piece of parchment paper. Parchment paper and wax paper are different. In the store, make sure you buy or you have what it specifically says, parchment paper, okay? So you can fold it in half and cut it to the shape that you need. It's very easy to cut. It's like regular paper. So you can cut it, and it's safe to put this one in the oven. It's not going to burn on you. So basically, you're gonna cut your shape of your parchment paper. They don't have to be perfect, just enough so it can hold your pretzel. Okay, I'm actually gonna leave a few that are a little bit bigger in case I have a larger pretzel. Don't put too much flour on your workstation. You're gonna be very tempted to put flour on here. It's gonna spin on you. You actually want it to be a little sticky. So you're gonna take your strip and begin to very gently shape it. Very gently. I'm not pushing it too hard. I'm just bringing it together, kind of some type of a rope. If you have those lines in your pretzel, that's okay, all right? We don't want it to be perfect at this point. You see how gentle I'm being with it? So I think it's long enough. The size of your pretzel depends on you. There's no perfect size. If they're good to eat, they're good. You're gonna shape it now into a U, okay? And kind of tack it here towards the end and pull, okay? Tack and pull. I still have lines in them. That's all right. Pick up your ends, twist it again. Now you have 2 pieces here. You're gonna bring those over, press, and now you have your pretzel shape. Onto your parchment paper, you're gonna put the knots down. So slip it onto your parchment paper. Okay? And now the pretzel has to rest again. So you continue, you do all your shapes, keep these covered while you're working, and keep these covered on your baking tray as well. Keep them covered the same way I have it here. Lightly cover them with plastic wrap. You can also put a little bit of oil if you want to with your finger on top of your pretzel so your plastic wrap won't stick. And you just continue doing your shapes and leaving them on your workstation. Now we're ready for the boiling part, the adding of the baking soda to the boiling water. This is where you want to be careful because you're going to be working around a hot stove and around boiling water. Make sure you take your time with this part of the process. But before, I want you to take a little bit of your kosher salt or your thicker salt, looks like little rocks. You're going to sprinkle some on the bottom of your baking tray just so your pretzels will have a little crunch on the bottom. So that's ready for me on the side. Now I have my pretzels covered with plastic wrap and I put a little bit of vegetable spray on there so it wouldn't stick. This pretzel is rising and the holes have closed a little bit. That's all right. You can take your finger and separate it. But remember, this is the first pretzel we made. It's not gonna be perfect. You're gonna take your parchment paper. You're gonna take your slotted spoon. So I have a couple of utensils over here that I'm gonna need. I need a spoon with holes in it, the slotted spoon. You can slip your pretzel on top of that. I'm also gonna need either a strainer or a rack. Some type of rack that you might have something like this at home that you never know what it's for. Today you're gonna find out. I also have another baking tray to kind of catch my water as I drain my pretzels. Okay, so either you have your strainer, you have your slotted spoon, or you have your rack. Your water should be boiling before you begin this process. If you're gonna touch this handle on top or this part of the lid, this is hot, so use a towel. So you're going to remove your lid. The water should be rapidly boiling. You need to add your baking soda to your water. This is very important. It's going to give you the color that you need. It's going to give the texture on your pretzel and a little bit of chewiness. So you're going to add your baking soda very carefully. Did you see how mine kind of went and kind of tried to get out of my pan? Be very careful. So you're going to slip your pretzel inside of the water with the parchment paper. The parchment paper should float off. So go ahead and flip it over and very gently peel off your parchment paper. See how it came off? You can put it on the side of your rack. You want to boil it on each side about 15 seconds, not too long. Take it with your spoon, drain as much of the water as you can, and either slip it on your rack or slip it in your strainer just to drain, or keep it on your spoon and continue to drain it. If I keep it on my spoon, I can slip it right on my baking tray. The pretzels, you let them rest here for a few more minutes and you sprinkle them with a little bit of salt and you put them into the oven. We're gonna check on our pretzels because I think they're done. What we're looking for is that golden brown color that's traditional to our pretzels. So let's take a look. And I am using an oven mitt because this tray is hot. So they look wonderful. They have that nice dark golden brown color. So now they're ready to enjoy and to plate and to eat our pretzels. So you can peel them off of your parchment paper. Don't worry if they give you a little bit of resistance, they'll come off. You can put them on your plate. And the most important part, you get to taste it and your family gets to taste it with you. I love the texture that a pretzel has on the inside. The bread is looks kind of stringy, and that's what we want. So let's see. Let's see if it's true, if they're good. Oh, they're delicious. They're very soft, and it has a nice crunch on the top with the salt flavor. It's very good. I hope you enjoy these pretzels, and I am very proud of you for trying and for making this recipe. Thank you.